Okay.
My life flows on in endless song above earth's lamentations. I hear the real, though far off, hymn that hails a new creation. Above the tumult and the strife, I hear that music ringing. It sounds an echo in my soul. How can I keep from singing? And though the tempest round me roars, I know the truth it liveth. And though the darkness round me close, songs in the night it giveth. No storm can break my inmost calm, while to that rock I'm clinging. If love is Lord of heaven and earth, how can I keep from singing? When tyrants tremble sick with fear and hear their death knells ringing. When friends rejoice, both far and near, how can I keep from singing? In prison cell, in dungeon vile, our thoughts to them are winging. When friends by shame are undefiled, how can I keep from singing? It's a song that was, I think, just released a month ago by Spencer LaJoya. And I just can't help but sing it everywhere. Somebody says, could you sing something? I'm like, yeah, can I do this song too? So here we go. Dear blessed Creator, dear Mother, dear Savior, dear Father, dear brother, dear holy other, dear sibling, dear baby, dear patiently waiting, dear sad and confused, dear stuck and abused, dear end of your rope, dear worn out and broke, dear go it alone, dear running from home, dear righteously angry, forsaken by family, dear jaded and quiet, dear tough and defiant, I pray that you're heard, and I pray that this works. I pray if a prayer has been used as a sword against you and your heart, against you and your word, I pray that this prayer is a plowshare of sorts, that it might break you open, it might help you grow. I pray that your body, it's all that it needs, and if you don't want healing, I pray just for peace. I pray that your burden gets lighter each day. I pray the mean voice in your head goes away. I pray that you honor the grief as it comes, and I pray you can feel all the life in your lungs. I pray that if you go all day being brave, that you can go home, go to bed feeling safe. I pray you're forgiven. I pray you forgive. I pray you set boundaries and openly live. I pray that you feel you are worth never leaving. I pray that you know I will always believe you. I pray that you're heard. And I pray that this works. I pray if a prayer has been used as a sword against you and your heart, against you and your word, I pray that this prayer is a plowshare of sorts, that it might break you open, it might help you grow. Amen on behalf of the last and the least. Amen. On behalf of the anxious, depressed, and unseen. Amen for the workers, the hungry, the houseless. Amen for the lonely and recently spouseless. Amen for the queers and their closeted peers. Amen for the bullied who hold in their tears. Amen for the mothers of little black sons. Amen for the kids who grew up scared of guns. Amen for the addicts, the ashamed and hungover. Amen for the callous, the wizened, the sober. Amen for the ones who want life to be over. Amen for the leaders who lose their composure. Amen for the parents who just lost their baby. Amen for the chronically ill and disabled. Amen for the children down at the border. Amen for the victims of our law and order. I pray that you're heard, and I pray that this works. I pray if a prayer has been used as a sword against you and your heart, against you and your word, I pray that this prayer is a plowshare of sorts.
Amen. Back to you, Richard.
Oh, there's nothing to say, I guess. Well, yes, I guess I can put up the official screen share of this part of the meeting today. Here, this is where we are now. And
when are we going to do the Trojan horse?
well, Dick is going to begin by raising those issues, and we will contribute at the time. It's not going to be a separate thing, but Dick will begin with that.
Okay, good.
I'm not sure how much of a business meeting this will be. We'll have to see near the end if people are willing to propose some actions or not.
I have a bunch of actions.
Yes, and if someone has actions or resolutions, we could consider that towards the end of this hour.
I'll have some. Are we going to do the Trojan horse first or actions first?
Yeah, the actions would be towards the end, I think. And then,
Okay, then you're on with the Trojan horse first part.
it's not quite time yet, so.
No, I think we're starting early.
Are we
We give
starting
you an
early?
extra 5 minutes, yeah,
Oh,
because you're adding material.
Okay,
Yeah,
okay,
and we're all here pretty
okay,
much.
yeah. But actually, before getting into the details of the eighth principle, like the word accountably, one of my tasks here was to look at what's happening with the UUA leadership. So people need to know that I've been zooming in on a number of UUA board meetings and open houses and some other meetings. And just to get an idea of what's going on. Try to figure out, are they talking about any of our issues or anything like that? But also just to put myself in and ourselves in as a human face. I figure it's hard for them to demonize us if we have a human face and vice versa. So that was one part. Just how human or inhuman are they? And I think that has helped because there have been some instances which I've gotten some minor but positive feedback from co-moderator Meg Riley, where she has said openly that we need to, listen to different points of view and generate some discussion and welcome visitors to the board meeting. And so I think my presence has helped there. But one of the big lessons I've learned is that any attempt to discuss our key issues, which is basically centered around the cancel culture, what happened to Todd Eckloff or Peter Morales, any attempt at all to discuss those is just totally ignored. If I try to say something or put it in the chat box, it's just totally ignored. It's like a hot potato. They just won't touch it. No one in the UUA leadership at all will touch any of our key issues. It's just untouchable. And so that needs to be a topic of discussion. Why is it so untouchable? And why, so we can't even bring up the cancel culture. Or if I bring it up, it's just ignore it. And I've brought it up several times in a variety of ways. I've in the chat box, I've also written after board meetings, I've sometimes written to the board about certain motions and things like that that they had proposed. For example, they're proposing to do a full revision of the bylaws. And they had a proposal written up on that, and I sent in a critique of that. And I got into that, some of these concerns about the word accountably, for example, in the 8th principle. But and then another interaction with the Article 2 Study Commission, I'd send in some separate comments from the survey. In the survey, I'd actually included some comments on the 8th principle in the one question which allowed general answers. But I sent in some separate comments, and some of those comments were they were about the 7 principles and everything. You know, what I actually did is they were revising the whole Article 2 the whole of Article 2. So I read the whole of Article 2, and I went through and identified, well, some things where we could do a few positive changes, better wording here and there or whatever. And at one point, I did say something about the 8th principle. Well, I got back a really, really nasty email from Becky Brooks, who was co-chair of the Article 2 Study Commission. And basically accusing me of using hate speech and everything else, which I hadn't. I was just saying, well, we have real concerns about this 8th principle, what it means, what these caucuses mean. I'll get into that shortly. And I just sent back to her, well, you're the one that's using hate speech, and I think I deserve an apology. And so I stood my ground, and I never got another response from her on that. But it shows that even any attempt to question the 8th principle, as Beverly discovered, is going to be met harshly. But we need to stand our ground. So that's one of the lessons I've learned from this. Another point before I get into the 8th principle itself is there's going to be on the ballot in the GA a business resolution to basically authorize this full revision of the bylaws. And they have some generic reasons, they're too complicated and this and that. But there's no vision of exactly how these should be revised, except they want to revise the bylaws to incorporate words like accountability or accountable, and to make people accountable. And there's no indication again exactly what the wording will be, how this will be done. But to me, this is opening up a huge can of worms, and I think it's going to be a huge power grab. And we don't have anyone in the association, you might call us here, a leading theologian, leading ministers. There are no leading people who have thought deeply about this, elders and others who are involved in this process at all. It seems like the only people involved in the only qualification for Article 2 Study Commission is to be woke and maybe be a minister or something like that. But there's no distinguished leaders, elders in there for good wording or good thinking or anything else like that. So now let's get into the article, the 8th principle. And to me, the key word is accountable. And if you remember in the 8th principle, we're supposed to hold ourselves and our institutions I guess to accountably dismantle racism and impressions in ourselves and our institutions. So what does this word accountable mean? And why is it even there? Like I searched through the UUA bylaws for the word accountable, and it's there a few times. What does it mean there? It's all about the UUA being accountable through democratic process to its member congregations. So why is this word, we already have a notion of accountability. Why is it in this 8th principle? What's going on here? Well, if you go to the website on the Article 2 Commission, you'll find there's a reference to another website, 8th principle UU.org. And in that website, which is like a promotion for the 8th principle, there's one section on the word accountable. So it's entitled, what does it mean to be accountable? So this is supposed to be explaining what the UUA thinks the word accountable means in this context. Most people won't have any idea, so I'll read it right to you right now. It says, white UUs hold themselves accountable to communities of color to make sure whites do what they say they will do. In practice, that can mean having a people of color caucus within congregations, districts, etc., to discern and express needs and concerns to the rest of the community. Black UUs hold each other accountable and help each other see and dismantle signs of internal racism. We need an effective mechanism or structure to ensure this. Similarly for other oppressions. So notice, first of all, accountable means different things to different people. If you're identified as a person, a white person, you are to be held accountable to not even to all persons of color, to these caucuses of persons of color, these self-selected caucuses. These aren't elected caucuses, these are self-selected caucuses. In the UUA, for example, Drum, there's a ministers of color caucus, there's blue. All white UUs are to be held accountable to these caucuses. The people inside those caucuses, black UUs, are accountable only to each other. They hold each other accountable, and they're looking for signs of internalized racism among themselves, but there's no accountability back to the UUA, to the member congregations, or anything like that. It's totally one-sided, which is a really, really big red herring to me. To me, that means we're set up for an abuse of power here. And then even more scary, says we need an effective mechanism or structure to ensure this. There's no suggestion that this mechanism must be democratic or accountable to the member congregations. What kind of effective mechanism? This is no hint at all. And then I finally realized what they're really talking about. We already have that effective mechanism, and that's cancel culture. The 8th principle is already in practice right now.
Take your time, brother. Take your time.
So what do we do about this? I mean, this is what I said in one of my comments on their bylaws. We talked about the word accountability. I said, what is this effective mechanism? It's obviously not democratic. There's no hint at democracy. It's all one-sided. What's going on here? This is an invitation to abuse of power. And when I realized, again, the 8th principle as proposed is actually being implemented already by our UUA leadership, where the effective mechanism is cancel culture, because there's nothing else. And if anything else were proposed, it would almost certainly be authoritarian. Otherwise, it wouldn't work for them. So do we have comments on this? Richard?
Well, I wanted to say that also in the 8th principle, I believe there's the word racism, correct?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, it's not in this It's not with the word accountable, but the
No,
word.
no, but it's in the eighth principle.
Yeah,
And
this is
it's another one-sided thing, the understanding of the word racism. The word racism is used in a way that's different than what's in the dictionary. They
Right.
have the special understanding whereby only white people can be racist. People of color can't be racist. Only white people, and all white people are racist.
Right, right. And one of the issues is that when they say all white people are racist, this is not new. This goes, Tandeka in their 1999 talk, the UUA cited that as one of the key problems with the whole UUA anti-racist thing is to claim that all white people are racist, because there's no basis in the social sciences for that statement. You can't go to find a solid body of rigorous scientific studies that validates that. Quite the contrary, I would say if you look at the popular vote in the last 4 presidential elections, demonstrates to me pretty clearly that a majority of Americans are not racist in any meaningful sense. Because otherwise they would have voted against Obama, and it would have gone way overwhelmingly towards Trump. You see, and so so when you look at it from the point of view, what's the actual common definition of the word racism? It means, prejudice or discrimination based on race. So if you say that all whites are racist, that in itself is a racist statement by the common definition. And that's exactly why John McWhorter in his book, Woke Racism, says that the ideology of people like in the UUA, the so-called anti-racist ideology, is itself racist. And that's one, and they actually, at one point, he calls it woke racism now, but he's actually used the word neo-racism. And Finley uses the word neo-racism in part for the same reasons. And so I think we need to be out there saying that the UUA anti-racist program is itself racist, but almost by definition, actually. And in fact, I've concluded that if you have an identity politics of race, and if your identity politics includes the concept of victimhood culture, that one group is the oppressor, the other is the victim, and with race it means the whites the oppressor and the blacks are the victim, that concept is necessarily racist in itself, because it's a gross simplification that's not even remotely true. And so but those vast generalizations are where the racism actually comes in.
I'd like to jump in on the question of multicultural. That's the big bugaboo. And in fact, I agree with my brother who said in our alternate wording, I will definitely take out the word multicultural. I'd like to give a little history about this stuff. In 2013 in Tulsa, Oklahoma, at the second conference designed to study more fully the goal of becoming a more anti-racist, anti-oppressive faith, the terms multiracial, multicultural were used. Notice that word multiracial has been dropped out of the proposed eighth principle, and one of the COIC investigators, Reverend Takahashi, I think that's her name, when I raised the issue about, well, why have you dropped out the word multiracial? She said, multiracial is premature. Miss Paula Cole Jones, who is now the leader of the PA principle movement, indicated to me at Tulsa conference that multiracial unity, or as she called it, racial integration, was going to be eliminated as an aspect of Unitarian Universalism. She called it the doctrine of the past, and multiculturalism would be the doctrine of the future. Now, it was pointed out that there's no definition of multicultural in the sources of the proposed eighth principle. Well, what does the term multicultural mean anyway? Nowhere in the blue sources is the term defined. At the Tulsa conference, for example, I explicitly asked Reverend Mark D. Hicks, an African-American professor at Meadville Lombard and the chief presenter, what did the term mean? He answered that each UU member had their own culture, which meant to me that we were already multicultural. At another workshop, I asked Reverend Kwaman Rahman, one of the leaders of Drum, the same question, and she answered me by saying, well, what's your definition? So I told her. So here's what I answered to Professor Rahman. If in reality, the word multicultural literally means of or relating to a social or educational theory that encourages interest in many cultures within a society rather than only a mainstream culture. And of course, the word culture itself, if you into the Franz Boas School of Anthropology, I apologize for using these terms, the norms, traditions, mores, and folkways of a people, especially people of different racial, ethnic backgrounds, as expressed in their social institutions and their expressive media. I taught a course at UW-Madison on the Afro-American cultural and intellectual tradition, by the way. Multiculturalism was first developed in Canada, where there were 4 basic racial ethnic groups living in a single nation. And so there was an attempt to bring them all in, Anglo-Canadians, French Canadians, Native or Indigenous Canadians, and Afro-Caribbean Canadians. And there were also non-Anglo-Saxon Europeans and Chinese Canadians. And all those cultures in Canada, relatively a diverse nation state, came up with this idea, the Trudeau Sr. So since we don't have a definition of multicultural that reflects the reality of what we are, I say take a look. Take a look at our Unitarian Universalist social organization. And we'll see we have the following elements. First of all, we are committed to a desegregated U.S. American society. Brother Trudeau described the evolution. And we didn't reach racial integration fully because of the Black Power movement and J. Edgar Hoover working together. Secondly, our culture is based on something called middle-class norms, regardless of race. We believe in education, higher education, and certain behavioral patterns that we associate with the middle class. Whether you're black, brown, or white, you fit into those norms. And thirdly, higher education is one of our major features. We are into, we don't mean to be, but our whole orientation, our origin is in an intellectuals trying to struggle with the nature of God and later the nature of humanity. So we're sort of like professionals and entrepreneurs. So we have all the cultural characteristics of that socioeconomic status. Now, people say, well, that's classism. Well, you can call it what you want, but that's the fact. Therefore, the only way that the term multicultural can have any logical meaning, this so-called eighth principle, is a racial, not a biological reality. That's what it's about, and it has emerged in a particular moment in the history of U.S. imperialism and world imperialism to come up with a way to keep us divided. So, in light of my brief history, I would say that the word multicultural really means, quote, the neo-racist ideology, which asserts that only people of color, especially African Americans, have true culture because of 400 years of so-called anti-Black oppression. And therefore, they should become the arbiters of what is and is not racist in the Unitarian Universalist Association of Congregations. By the way, I have a whole pamphlet on this stuff. If you want to order it, I'll show you how to do it. Those white UUs who do not support this vision are either white supremacists, white privileged elitists, or secret negrophobes. And those people of color who oppose the eighth are race traitors, victims of their own internalized racism. Or as Reverend Mel Hoover of Crossroad Ministries once described me, CIA agents. So this Trojan horse that is being dragged into the gates of our great religion is filled with all these enemies. And like the prophets of old, we must point out, hey, there's danger coming, there's danger coming. And in the original myth, the prophets of doom are canceled by one of the gods sending snakes to kill the prophets, guy was named Laocoon. And they killed him, and therefore they brought the damn thing into the city. Well, we don't plan to allow this big old Trojan horse to be brought into the city, and they can try to cancel us if they will, but there's no way they're going to win unless we give up the struggle, which you don't plan to. So that's what multiculturalism means to me, just another fancy word for neo-racism.
Sounds to me like what we're talking about is simply doing all we can to vote down the eighth principle, because they're not open to changing it. And it's got multiple Trojan horses. It's the, as you point out, the multiculturalism. But, you know, and there's this word accountable. I forgot one aspect I need to mention on that. And that is the word slander. Cancel culture involves slander. And when you look at the word accountable, it means white is accountable to black, but black is not accountable to white or anyone else. It means they can get away with, they have it means they're being given a real privilege and power, and they can abuse that power. And a prime example is slander. They can slander Reverend Peter Morales and his administration with false accusations of racism and white supremacy, never substantiated. They can slander Reverend Todd Eckloff with those accusations and many, many more, again, never substantiated. And no one is there to hold them accountable because they've already decided to follow the eighth principle where accountability is one way. And I think that's exactly what's going on, that our leaders, Susan Frederick Gray and all the other leaders, are following the eighth principle. The accountability is totally one way. They have to do what the people of color say. And if the people of color think that, oh, there's some kind of imagined harm and they want to cancel somebody, defellowship someone, well, you can't complain about it because the accountability, they don't have any accountability. So I think that's another aspect of this Trojan horse, is that our democracy, our legal due process, a whole democracy is being destroyed in the UUA by this. And we can fight back and say, we want something that's democratic. If it's going to be multicultural, it's got to be truly multicultural. It can't just be a Trojan horse or, you know, anti-white racism or whatever we'll call it like this. So we've got a couple of examples of Trojan horses now. Does anyone else have examples they want to point out too? Like Karen?
Karen Brown has her hand up.
Actually not a Trojan horse, but I wanted to get back to your comment about, well, how are they going to implement this accountability? And it talks all about this in that report called Widening the Circle of Concern, which the board has adopted as its roadmap to UU in the future. So may I share a little bit about that?
Yes, just want you to do that, because that's
okay.
I
Well,
read
I've been
a couple of years ago now, and you can refresh my memory.
okay. Yes, well, it's a very difficult document to understand, and I have I am trying to finish up a report right now. It's 28 pages, single space, of what it says, and it'll be out any day. I keep tweaking it, and I hope that UUMUAC will share it with all of y'all. If you want to send me your email, you know, in the chat there, please do, and I'll make sure you get a copy of it. But I have read it like a million times, or at least 20 my notes, which are very thorough. So I'm getting really, really familiar with this thing, and it's really hard to understand. So it's been helpful to me to have to read over and over and over and over. So what they want to do is they make white people accountable to caucuses and to panels, but not to individual, not to individual Black people. White people will be accountable to groups, not to individuals. And in fact, you're not supposed to, if you're white, you're not supposed to ask anyone who's Black for their opinion or to serve on the board or something, because that would be exploiting them as objectifying them as an identity instead of a human being. But they have proposed having a panel, what I call the elect, which is you know, the ones in, I think, Christianity that God is going to accept into heaven. I don't know if it's part of Judaism or not. And what John McWhorter calls the elect, which is the woke. And they get to tell you what the truth is. And so this panel would be selected by the UUA board of trustees, no, it wouldn't be selected by them, but members from identity groups. And the examples given in the book are Blue, Drum, and Equal Access for starters, would form this panel, the elect, to assess accountability, to assess, I don't have the exact word, let me just pull up my document here. The report recommends that the UUA form an independent body or panel that would identify systematic changes, monitor accountability, and report annually at GA, and have representation on the board. This body would be composed of people from Drum, Blue, Trust, and Equal Access, for starters. In this context, in the book, it says, WCC report emphasizes that UUs need to be accountable to this independent body rather than to individuals, to avoid overburdening individuals and to avoid undermining the democratic process. And they see somehow this elect as being democratically elected, I presume by those identity groups. And if you look into some of those identity groups like Blue, Black Lives UU, you have to meet an awful lot of criteria to be a member of it. Not just do you have to be, I can't remember their particular version of Black, if you have to be have to be a diaspora from Africa or what, but the different groups have their different criteria. But you also have to be like on the leadership council of Blue and be on the this of that, and you have to have contributed money. So it has 4 criteria that involves already being a leader. So as far as I can tell, to be a member of Blue, you already have to be a leader of Blue. I'm not really clear on that. But so that's not even representing all Black people, right? So this is very peculiar, but I think their intention is, and I think the board has adopted this, is that white people are supposed to be accountable to some kind of a group, possibly the elect or that group that the board that would report to GA, but not be accountable to, but who would tell us what needs to happen. Possibly also to regional caucuses. I can't really tell. It's not very clear. So it is very much a top-down kind of thing. Instead of the UUA being accountable to congregations, which the association is accountable to the congregations whose organization it belongs to, right? It would change it to congregations being accountable to the UUA. That's my take. Thank you.
Well, I would add, well, sticking with my original metaphor, somebody just quoted from the Aeneid, where the Trojan horse is given a full presentation. Everything you're describing are the individual Greek soldiers inside of the horse. You got Odysseus, you got Mentusius, Decimus, and Decimus. All of these are inside the single horse called the proposed eighth principle. So we don't have to fight 4 or 5 different Trojan horses. One horse filled with Greek soldiers, and each one of these things we've named is a part of these armed insurgents who, once they get into the wall, are going to burn us down. Once they get into the walls, they're going to burn us down. That's why we're using this term Trojan horse. We're going to be at war. The war presently is theological or ideological. But once they come pouring out of the horse, we don't want to be caught by surprise. That's what they're hoping. We'll be caught by surprise because they got this black face upon this neo-racist situation. But that's what neo-racism means, to involve the talented tenth, the upper class African-American elite in the maintenance of a institutionalized racist system. So they call it, they say they're against racism. In fact, they're the leaders of the racist movement and have been since 1966. So one horse, but a lot of different soldiers in it.
Also, there's a lot of money in it because all of this business involves, I mean, the widening the circle of concern is about, for reparation, giving money to both lay people and lay leaders and whoever who is Black to attend conferences which I guess is already being done, including compensating for lost wages and childcare, and of course, transportation, hotel, and all that, but also to compensate everybody for their work on, I guess, on the caucus work. So it's also, I think, about creating a lot of jobs.
Yeah, I think also, Finley, about the Trojan horse and the armed people coming out of the Trojan horse, that's already happened. You know, the Trojan, the armed, those armed warriors are already running the UA right now. They haven't come out and with big visible weapons. Of course, they have a different strategy. They sort of snuck out very carefully, trying to hide themselves. But they are actually running the UA right this moment, trying to hide, still trying to be kind of stealthy, like they're a Trojan horse. So but they're actually running things, but trying to hide because they're afraid that if it becomes more visible, then there'll be this big backlash and reaction. And then, in fact, some of us here finally figured out, as Finley has, what's going on. And so now we'll be leading that reaction against the takeover.
Rod Brown has his hand up. You're muted, Rod.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Oh, okay. A couple of things come to my mind. When they did the widening the circle or whatever it was called that Karen was referring to, the study, it was interesting to actually read about the process. They all took a break. They went to lunch or somewhere, maybe had wine. I don't know what happened there. And they came back and somebody said, I think we're all in agreement here, aren't we? And the agreement was, of course, that you are all, most of you, I guess, are all racist, Eurocentric. We're all in agreement of that. And I guess the agreement was, of course, that $5 million, was it? Or was it 4 million of the money from the churches should be given away to Blue and other organizations. And I guess the agreement was also, they all smiled, and was not only that you were racist, Eurocentric, and that human reason was a disaster, and that their felt experience was that perhaps all your money should go. And that if you're a small organization, a small church, a struggling church, they would come and send someone down to do an assessment on your brokenness. They would assess, of course, if you were a troubled church, if you, on your degree of wokeness. And if you failed that test, there would be a strong recommendation and pressure to take your endowment monies when they kill you off and send it to the UUA. To their organization, to Blue or one of the 4 that they had listed. And so they all joyfully said, yeah, we don't need to vote, maybe. I don't know exactly how it happened, but somebody said, I think we're all in agreement here. And they all said, yes. And that was the end of democratic process. That was the assignment of your status as being eternally racist because of your pigment of your skin. And that was when you were delegated to being passé, uncultured, and Eurocentric. And that was the end. That's how it happened. And it happened quickly, and it happened irresponsibly. And that $3 or $4 million had no oversight, no one looking after it, no one responsible to who? What was the association created for? For you, for our congregations. To look after each other. What the hell happened? I'm done.
Wasn't that Leslie Mack that led that?
Yeah.
Sounds like it.
Yeah.
Yeah. We were expelled from the Chicago area UU council only because we wrote an essay saying, well, those of you who do not wish to contribute to this fund and you don't know what they're going to spend the money for and all of that, we said, well, we have an option. And we laid out what we wanted to use the money for, including supporting our brothers and sisters in Afghanistan and other things. And because we made that simple offer of an option for those who did not wish to pay the money, and by the way, it was successful. Some churches said, okay, we're not going to pay the money. They didn't say it does either. We were eventually expelled from the entire Chicago area council, even though we helped to set up the council. So to some degree, but my good friend Dick is right. They have already seen certain aspects of our city, but the masses, once aroused, will get out our swords and shields and say, "Wait a minute, we're going to push you guys out of here," or somebody's got to leave the city. And we have to take it like Aeneas says in the Aeneid. They grab all of the household gods. It's okay. You're taking over. We're taking all the real treasure, which is our hearts, our spirits, our energy, and you'll have this burning city, but the true reality will be elsewhere. So either way it goes, we're going to win.
Yeah, okay. I'm going to go on to
Calvin has had his
current
hand up.
actions that we
Calvin
can.
has his hand up.
Wait a minute, David,
Calvin.
there are two Davids with their hands up.
Yeah, now I want to go into current actions, that things that we can do, but let's have a couple more people. We have their hands up. I think David Wadley and David Fentress had their hands up, but then we need to talk about things that are happening now and things that we can do. David Wadley, you want to talk?
Yeah, I'll be really brief. I just want to suggest that we all adopt this hand sign, you see. Now, I don't know if you know what this means, but I grew up in Calgary where they have a lot of horses. And this means one for you and one for your horse. The sideways thumb is for the horse. And in this case, it could be the Trojan horse. And so now we have a secret hand sign, you see, that we can give to each other.
Well, oh yeah.
David Fentress, you have something?
Yes.
Absurd.
Yeah,
We never tried that, but I should have thought of it. Okay, sorry.
David?
Yes, I was just going to say, I think this ties into the Trojan horse concept, that when I first read the proposed eighth principle, one of the things that jumped out at me was this phrase to accountably dismantle racism and other oppressions. That strikes me as really sloppy writing, for one thing. It's like saying, well, we hate racism, and by the way, we hate some other stuff too. Well, what is this other oppressions? I mean, suppose I'm a employer, suppose I'm a business owner and an employee comes to me and says, well, you're part of the capitalist system of oppression. I don't have to do what you say. Well, that's debatable. Some folks might feel that way, but I guess I'm a little concerned about what other sorts of things could be possibly sanctioned by, if this eighth principle passed, then it could be sanctioned as, okay, that's a form of oppression too. The eighth principle says other forms of oppression, so there you are.
I can tell you the obvious ones is what's the biggest controversy? Race. What's the next biggest controversy? Gender. So look what happened to Kate Rhodey, when she questioned some of the gender police around here. So that as a political thing, they wanted to get support from the gender police, basically people who are willing to do the same kind of thing for gender has been done for race. And of course, there could be more important than other things too, obviously. You could, and there are a whole slew of oppressions. But that's the only other one that I know is really that active in the UUA is the gender issue. But let's go on and.
Calvin has had his hands up.
Calvin up, okay, Calvin, because we need to get on.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, I'll be very quick. Just wanted to say, Finley, if you are CIA, I'm in a lot of trouble. And also, speaking of accountability, the money that was given to this Black group Blue, were they ever accountable to how they spent it? They were never accountable.
No, it was illegal to even ask him where that money was going.
Right.
We had to trust them.
Right.
So
that's
we are to be accountable, but not them.
Yeah, that's exactly in accordance with this definition of accountable. That's one way. So they're not accountable for the way they spend the money. That's part of their doctrine. You see, and that's part of the problem. But let's get on to what things are being done, and I'll review a few things. I've already talked about how I've been participating, and some other UUMUAC people have participated in some of the UUA meetings. But right now, another issue that's come is, can UUMUAC have an exhibit hall, a booth in an exhibit hall? And we lost that 2 years ago because someone attacked us as apparently being out of right relations or whatever like that. We still don't know if we can get it this year or not. But for those of you who are not on board, we have been working on that. We finally been referred to Kerry McDonald, who's the executive chief of staff, to see if there's some resolution on this that will allow us to have an exhibit hall this year. And I got a response, an automated response from him. He's on some family emergency at present. So we don't yet have a resolution on that, but we are working that issue to see if we can't have some accommodation. And I think there are some people in the UA who probably do want us to see us have a booth, and others who don't. And it'll be very interesting to see how this turns out. I'm not too optimistic with it thrown back in the hands of Kerry McDonald. And the reason is, when I was at I listened into the UUA Western Regional Meeting where Paula Jones spoke. And at one point she talked about the people in the UUA who were in effect her strongest supporters or followers. And she mentioned 3 people. One was our president, Susan Frederick Douglas Gray. Next was Kerry McDonald, executive vice president. And the other was Craig Boyd, who's off the board right now. But we also know that Kerry McDonald is the one that wrote this really nasty letter to our friends in Austin, Texas, now the Open Hearts and Mind Fellowship. And so I'm not that optimistic, but what I've been trying to do is to work the process in a sort of gentlemanly kind of way, just to see how far we can get with that. And because again, I've had some positive feedback from Meg Riley and from a couple other people who know me in the UUA. And I'm surprised I've not been totally banned at all. I mean, like, look what happened to Beverly Cease when she just talked about the word proposed 8th principle. And she was already attacked for that in this one conversation, Zoom conversation, whereas I wasn't. So it may be that I actually have some credibility. We can see how that goes. I also want to say another thing is we do have 199 signatures on our petition now. This is a petition that came out a couple of years ago, and I was the primary one who put that together. And it pointed out the big issue with the cancel culture with Todd, the way Todd Ackloff was treated. But it tried to find some common ground in saying that we needed to have some forums on looking towards the future of the UUA and look at the global problems in our society and around the world. And couldn't we find some common ground to look at the future and not such a narrow, backward-looking way? And so far, we've gotten no positive response from the UUA on that. I did send in a copy about a year ago, but other people are gradually signing on. If you haven't signed on, you can go to the UUMUAC website, uumuac.org, and look down. You'll find a little thing you can click on for the petition. And the more people we get, the idea, the better. But again, I'm trying to look in this case for some positive things we can represent, not just negative things. Another thing we're working on is that we hope to have an article coming out in the Christian Century magazine that Ann Schneider has interviewed Finley Campbell about neo-racism, this whole project, and with our problems with the UUA. And we've got a pretty good first draft. And I'm sure there'll be some revisions probably from the editor, but so far they seem interested. And if we can get that out, that's bound to have considerable impact because Christian Century is kind of a progressive general purpose Christian magazine that is apparently fairly widely read even among UUs. So that's another way we're getting our word out. And another thing that we can think about also is some of us in individual churches or regions have a support group. Like in Seattle, Washington area, the church I'm from, the Saltwater UU congregation. It's not just my wife Mona and me who are there, who are supporters of UUMUAC, but we have some others. We have like Bill Adams and Mary Painter, who are both very senior activists, very active on like issues of environment and things like that. But a few years back when they had these white supremacist teach-ins all across the country, they decided, well, they're activists, let's go to those white supremacist teach-ins. And they were extremely offended by what they heard there, being called racist and white supremacists just because of their skin color, basically. And so I think there are probably other people out there too who are offended by what's going on. And if they're activists, they've determined to do something about it. And so some of us in our church have switched some of our support to Todd Eckloff's church in Spokane, and I've actually become a full member of his church too. And I usually log into his Sunday morning services at 9:15, and I find that they are superior to the ones we have at Saltwater. Even though I know a lot more people at Saltwater, I go to some of the others, and I go to some other churches, church services in the Seattle area too. Actually, we have a progressive United Methodist congregation I've been involved in. So some of you might want to think about what can you do locally? Are there other people who think like you? Could you switch some of your financial support and allegiance to UUMUAC or Todd Eckloff's church? What other things might make sense in your local area? In the Puget Sound area, besides just our own church, I've got about a dozen, more than a dozen other people from other churches in the region who have at some point have gotten involved with UUMUAC or expressed some kind of interest. And so I have an email list of those people. And so we can kind of coordinate to a certain extent within our region. But we need more leadership. We're not quite yet strong enough to be a UUMUAC chapter. So I want people here to think about what they can do in their own churches or in their own regions that might make a difference. So any other things people are doing? We know the Austin church is doing some really good things. Do other people have things that they are doing they can tell us in their area? And we know quite a bit from the Chicago area already.
Well, on the national level, a good follow-up from what we are doing today is to attend on Monday. Those who already know about this, but we can expand it a little bit. We have an activist workshop. People want to learn how to be activists and how to build nuclei chapters and congregations, which will be on Monday. We can put it in the chat. Alan Lindrup knows the dates more than I do. And also we're going to be having our last session on the nature of neo-racism as a class. But the interest that has been shown, I'm going to start a new series called Conversations Against Racism, much more open-ended, much more dealing with these particular things. And of course, not only do we have our petition, the number that I'm looking at is the same number that was sent to attack Brother Todd. We want the same number opposing what they did, and also the future of UUA. Where do we go from here? Chaos or community? So I'm looking at least 400 signatures. So get those signatures in. Last but not least, we want to have we're going to try to enter into the UUA GA 2022 in where's it going to be? Portland. we're going to Reverend Sigford's headquarters, as it were. We want to have a mixture of tactics ranging from inside where we can, outside where necessary, and we will have a what we call Zoomarama, a sort of a Zoom parallel. So UUMUAC will certainly be at that, and we encourage people to come. But I agree with Brother Dick. A lot of the evil has already been done, and so I would like to hear from other people what they're doing or what they want to do in their own neighborhoods.
I just saw another thing we've done in our church in Saltwater. 4 of us wrote letters to the UUA, to Susan Frederick Gray, and to the board, and to the Ministers Association, Ministerial Fellowship Committee. And we said, well, you know, it's time to apologize to Todd Eckloff. There was never a case made against him. There was a lot of slander against him involved, and a lot of lack of due process. You know, now is the time to do something. And we did get responses. They were not good responses. They were formulaic responses. No one really engages very seriously. But I think the more people do that, the more they will realize that there's discontent. Because Susan Frederick Gray has said, well, all she hears about is from people who support what the UUA is doing. That was her claim. So we need to make sure that the UUA hears from the rest of us too.
We're approaching the end of our time here.
Other people must have ideas or can tell us what they're doing in their churches or would like to do.
Joyce, you're muted.
Thank you. A couple of things. One, we formed a disenchanted group within our large fellowship. We're 34 members now and growing pretty rapidly. And we've had one meeting offsite, and we're about to have another one, trying to decide for ourselves what we can do to derail this 8th principle train at our fellowship, or to think about, do we need to do something else, affiliate with people like you, or create a permanently offsite gathering like you did in Austin. But one of the couple of things that are coming out of that, Ken Eng created a video and some slideshows about the 8th principle that are now up on the UUMUAC website. Thank you, Richard. So we're trying to create, and we have a couple of people who are really tech savvy. So we're going to try to create more video materials that offer alternatives. But the other thing I think that I would again say is, rather than, I want to be able to say to our congregation, this is one approach to racism. There are others that we like more. And I'm working again with this race amity group here in our town. They want to declare, it's already been declared in Massachusetts and I think New York, Race Amity Day on June 12th in conjunction with Juneteenth. And we're working to do that in our county, but there's a national organization trying to get this adapted throughout the country. And so that's another thing I want to be able to say, here's another approach that we think is better. And so I encourage you all to look at that national organization called raceamity.org. Those are my thoughts.
Well, we did say we have been blocked out of the UU world, so I'd like to propose that we begin to treat the Arrow as our alternative press, as it were. We have always put the Arrow out online. You can get copies, or if you'd like to have a hard copy, but I committed myself to giving money to UPS to print up a hard copy like this. And one day we may have a magazine, very crude, but very good. We also have a chapbook of sermons by some of our top UUMUAC ministers, including Brother Todd, Brother Craig, myself. That's now available in a hard copy. So distribute, subscribe, make the arrow our replacement until such time as we can either regain the UU world or create a better one. So that's another thing we can do. Make this your weapon of choice in a positive way.
Finley, maybe we could have a letters to the editor in the MAC.
We want to make that in the newsletter. The newsletter is much more designed. Okay, they'll come out monthly.
Yeah,
The
okay.
newsletter called From the Mountaintop will be a monthly newsletter, letters, commentary, small snippets, anything you want to write that has to do with the fight will be welcome into that document. Yeah, I just put it in there,
sounds
no editing,
fantastic.
and out.
The news from the mountaintop, would that be the name?
The view from the mountaintop,
View
based
from
on
the
Martin
mountaintop.
Luther King's I've been to the mountaintop.
Hmm.
The view from the mountaintop. You should have, UUMUAC maybe should have gotten out copies some time ago. The April edition is available. If I get stuff by April 15th, either send it to the UUMUAC site or send it to me. And I'll put my email in the chat.
So is that available? Is there one available already on the website or not?
Yeah, the April edition is available.
Oh, okay.
Finley, I mean, you had the View from the Mountaintop came out in March. We don't have
March.
We don't have an April edition.
That's right, the March edition, that's right, it's available.
It was,
This is the time when often we call for last words. I'm not sure we want to hear 33 last words.
I'd like to hear from people who haven't said anything. Now they should have the last word, the ones who have not spoken at all.
Who
So
wants
we
who
gotta
wants the
hear
last
from them.
words?
The
All
plan
you
is-
silent people, say something.
the plan is a few last words, and then Leah will lead our closing hymn rank by rank, Finley's favorite hymn, and I'll put the words on the screen. And then Wes Hromatko and
I just want to say thanks for the good fight. It's great that we're putting up a fight.
Thank you, there we go. Anybody else? Was this useful? We
Useful. Excellent.
Okay, there we go. That's right. Thank you, Elaine and Gary.
Well, climate change and clean energy is perhaps a higher priority than rankling over these issues. Maybe it's existential threat.
Right.
Well, we have done as the Lord hath commanded, and yet there is room, as my father used to say.
Yeah, the reason I'm working on these is that these issues here, because these are the cultural war issues, and the cultural wars are actually blocking progress on addressing climate change and the Green New Deal. And we're getting all this political gridlock from the cultural wars. And so we need to solve the cultural wars in part to make progress on some of these other issues.
Exactly.
Yep, there we go. We got it.
And I've always wanted, that's my motivation. I want to work on global climate change and ecosystem collapse and resources and all those things. And I'm being blocked by all this racial stuff and gender stuff and whatever else.
Ending the war in Ukraine and
Yeah.
abolishing nuclear weapons.
Yeah, nuclear
Yes.
weapons, geopolitics.
Peace. The detente. All right, we're going to give it back over to our chair, Brother Trito, and back in your hands. Everybody's had a chance who wanted to say something, and now we're ready for closing.
Now we're ready to hear Leah lead us in rank by rank, and I'll put the words on the screen.
All right, I'm going to silence so I can sing it real loud. Scared of dog.
There we go. Rank by rank again we stand, from the four winds gathered hither, loud the hallowed walls demand, whence we come and how and whither, from their stillness breaking clear, echoes wake to warn or cheer, higher truth from saint and seer, call us to assemble here. Ours the year's memorial store, honored days and names we reckon, days of comrades gone before, lives that speak and deeds that beckon, from the dreaming of the night to the labors of the day, shines the everlasting light. Though the path be hard and long, still we strive in expectation. Join we now their ageless song, one with them in aspiration, one in name, in honor one. Guard we well the crown they won, what they dreamed be ours to do. Hope their dreams and seal them true.
That's it.
Oh,
Yeah. I can't
1,
find.
2, 3. Yep, that's it.
I can't find the button to unshare now here. Yeah.
It's usually at the top.
Aha.
Stop sharing.
Yeah, but it wasn't at the top.
Ah,
It was.
There we go.
Hi.
And now Reverend Wesley Hromatko and Sister Marie Cobbs will do closing words and extinguish the chalice.
We of all colors, kinds, and conditions extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again. Amen.
Amen.
And with that, I extinguish the chalice. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Leah. Beautiful music.
We'll try to have the recordings up on YouTube as soon as possible.
Fabulous. Thanks.
Right, pass the word. Tell everybody we're here.